I'm Kathleen Henderson from Roots and Boots, and in this video I'm going to show you how to freeze dry raspberries. We have been harvesting tons of homegrown raspberries from our original raspberry patch, which is shown here, as well as our second newer raspberry patch, which is probably at least 2 or 3 times the size of the original raspberry patch that you can see here in this video. Ideally, we're harvesting every day, but realistically, probably more like every other day. And it is a lot of raspberries. So I canned a lot of jam, and now I have moved on to freeze drying. You start by spreading out your berries in a single layer on your freeze dryer trays. And then I'm adding plastic lids on top of each tray, which helps to protect the berries as they freeze. And it makes it easier to stack the trays in the freezer, which saves a ton of space. At the very least, I freeze them overnight, sometimes 24 hours, and then I move on to the next step, which is to add the trays of frozen raspberries to the freeze dryer. The trays are super cold because they are metal and they just came out of the freezer. So I like to do this really fast, and sometimes I will even wear gloves or use a hot pad or an oven mitt or a towel or something to protect my hands because it's pretty chilly to touch those frozen metal trays. When the freeze drying cycle is complete and the raspberries are dry and crispy, they should also be warm or room temperature. You do not want to store freeze-dried food that is cold. If it's cold, simply choose the option on your freeze dryer to add more drying time. You always want to jar up or package up warm or room temperature freeze-dried food. And then I'm simply adding the freeze-dried berries to a large jar using my favorite stainless steel wide mouth funnel. You can see that the berries retain their color. They're still that bright pink raspberry color. They also retain their size and shape. So this is different from dehydrating. When you dehydrate, the food actually shrinks. But when you freeze dry, the food stays the same size. So the benefits of freeze drying are not necessarily saving on space, but freeze drying is known to preserve more of the nutrients in the food. And an obvious benefit of freeze drying is that the food is shelf stable and does not take up space in the freezer, which is the same for dehydrated food, but you do lose some of the nutrient content when you dehydrate because a dehydrator is basically a really low temperature oven, so you are heating the food. And reconstituting freeze-dried food is much easier than reconstituting dehydrated food. Once the jar is filled, simply add a lid and be sure to label the lid. I always like to make sure to put the date on it so that we can eat up the oldest food first, just like any preservation method. Optionally, you can add an oxygen absorber. You can also seal the jars. But if you're going to be consuming the food within the next 6 months to a year, oxygen absorbers may not be necessary. Freeze-dried raspberries can be eaten straight as a snack. They can be added to trail mix. You can add them to smoothies. You can reconstitute them, use them in any number of ways to make salad dressing, crumble them over a salad. There are so many ways to use freeze-dried raspberries. And that's how to freeze-dry raspberries. If this video was helpful to you, please give me a thumbs up, a like, and make sure to subscribe to my Roots and Boots YouTube channel for more homesteading, homeschooling, home-based content here on YouTube.